At the University of Toledo, we are surrounded by experts. And we tap into those experts here on Rocket Talk.
The price we pay for almost everything is going up, and you didn't need me to tell you that. A trip to the gas station, grocery store, auto dealership, restaurant, you name it. It seems that we're experiencing sticker shock everywhere. So what's going on, and will prices ever return to what they were just a year ago? Here to discuss, Doctors David Black and Mike Dowd, associate professors in the Department of Economics here at the University of Toledo. Thanks to both of you for joining us today on Rocket Talk.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So let's jump right in. David, what's driving these prices?
Well, if you listen to the media, part of the cost is supply chain hiccups, and I just read recently that there's fewer and fewer truck drivers bringing the goods to the where they need to be sold, and if that continues, you're going to see rising costs to the producers, and those are going to be passed on to consumers.
Mike, it takes a lot more these days to fill up a Harley than it did just a year ago. What's happening?
Well, like Dr. Black said, you've got supply chain problems, which the increase in the cost of production and just transportation, ultimately it's going to be passed on to the consumers. And to the point that you made in the introduction, you're looking at about 4.5% inflation now. Now it's been about a little less than 2% for the last 5-6 years. But you're seeing producer prices rising by about 8.5%. And so this is giving you a signal of what's actually to occur. We're not likely to get 8.5% inflation of consumer prices, but that 4.5% of consumer prices are probably going to edge upward before they come back down again.
You said before they come back down. Will we ever see 2020 prices again?
Well, can I modify the question?
Yes.
2020 was kind of a messed up year. How about 2019 prices? If the supply chains that Dr. Black was talking about are restored, if employment comes back, so the goods are being supplied to companies and to stores, we're much more likely to return from the higher inflation we're experiencing now back to a much more moderate rate of inflation. Would you agree?
Just today I saw that most of the inflation is stemming from food and energy prices. Yeah. And also the big thing that I see is that there's fewer truckers getting the goods to the marketplace, and in fact that was one of the biggest stories over in England. That, I mean, right now they have shortages at the gas pump, and not because there isn't a supply of gas, it's because they don't have truckers to get that gas to the marketplace. And if that happens in the United States, we could see we're already seeing that. Getting packages delivered is now taking delays.
Well, and consumers have shown that we're willing to pay more. We'll pay more. So what's the incentive to decrease the prices if things do straighten out?
If they're paying more for food and energy, that means they have less left over for other things. So inflation, at least unanticipated inflation, or if your incomes are growing at a slower rate than prices, then you have to make choices of you're going to be spending a larger share of your income on food and energy. You spend a smaller share on other things.
And Mike, you mentioned that things may get worse before they get better. Are there other ripple effects here that the average consumer may not be aware of, but things that you can forecast?
Well, Dave actually brought up one of them. We need to have happen, if you want to keep individuals harmless by this, wages would have to go up by the exact same amount as prices. But that typically does not happen. Wages typically lag behind increases in the price level. So what that means is their real income, their inflation-adjusted income, is actually shrinking, which is one of the points that Dave was making. This is one of the biggest ripple effects, and the notion that you're facing higher prices, it's also to recognize that an inflation rate of whatever percent you want to talk about doesn't affect everybody the same. The price of gasoline is going to be changing at a different rate than the price of bread. And so those who use gasoline a lot are going to be hurt much more from this inflation than, say, other individuals. In other words, there's distributional effects. This is not something that just affects everyone equally. There are serious distributional effects for inflation, and in particular, in rising inflation, because the issue that you raised, people have to learn how, what adjustments to make. And the adjustment process is going to be during the increases in the price levels. What they could substitute, as Dave was talking about, that's a learning process. And until that's done, until those adjustments are made, you're going to see these distributional effects hurt some people more than others.
You mentioned the worker shortages earlier. Why are we experiencing this?
Now that's a loaded question. The only thing that I can say regarding that is that we see hiring signs all over the place. It seems that if you want to get starting level positions with no skills is now appears to be about $15 an hour in Toledo. That's much higher even than the minimum wage. And yet businesses cannot seem to find enough workers to maintain their hours. What's causing that? There I would give you some guesses at what I think are causing it, but that needs a little bit more investigation of why businesses are finding it more and more difficult to staff.
Could I jump in on this?
Yeah, and I would like to hear the stimulus checks, extended unemployment benefits. How did that contribute to this?
The bump to the unemployment benefits in the early parts of COVID was a righteous thing to do, and the decision to continue it on, that is certainly open to debate. But one of the more severe issues when you have unemployment jump up like this is during COVID, there were many, many people who lost their jobs. They went out, they tried to get another job, but they couldn't find one. Now, what happens in some cases is that people just get discouraged and they stop looking. And the unfortunate thing is when they stop looking, they're not considered unemployed anymore by the official rates. And so if you see an unemployment rate of 5%, because of these discouraged workers, the actual unemployment rate is actually much higher than that, can be much higher than that. And that's part of what Dave was talking about, where businesses can just have a very difficult time trying to find workers, and it's much worse than what's indicated by the official unemployment rate.
So, what advice do you give to consumers? What should we be bracing for?
I like to go back to the producers. The producers, if their costs are rising, if their costs are rising, that's going to be passed on to consumers. And as long as you have those supply side issues, such as getting goods to the market, not only to consumer goods, you're also talking about intermediate goods to producers. That's raising the cost of everybody. As they say, time is money, and if it costs more to run a business, that price will be passed on.
Mike, what say you to that? If you advising the consumers, what advice do you have?
I'd echo everything that Dr. Black mentioned, but I'd also start looking at some of the governmental actions. Budget deficits drive up prices. The Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States, which controls the growth rate of the money supply, they're under extreme pressure to allow interest rates to go up. And if that happens, they're going to be tightening the money supply, which actually adds additional pressure to the inflation rate of consumer prices and producer prices. Now, that's over perhaps the next 6 months before anything like that would happen, most likely. But it's what Dave was saying, there's a demand side effect and there's a supply side effect.
Well, doctors, we so appreciate you for coming on to Rocket Talk. We could talk about this for hours, but unfortunately we are running out of time. Thanks to you for joining us. That's all the time we have. We'll be back on the 22nd with more Rocket Talk from the University of Toledo.